Let's have a great show. And welcome back to Luminary Leaders Live. My name is Shelly Harrison, and I'm your host. And I have my guest here with me, Dr. Fred Moss, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. I want to thank our sponsor, Endeavor Mortgage, with Dan Leonard, Vice President of Endeavor Mortgage in Seal Beach, located in Seal Beach, but they do business all over Southern California. So we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Endeavor Mortgage. And now a little bit about Dr. Fred, and we'll get into a conversation. And I want you to stick around because we have a very deep conversation today, and it's going to be very intriguing. So I want to get you ready to listen and tune in and hear this conversation with Dr. Fred. Dr. Fred is a graduate of Northwestern University Medical School and a licensed psychiatrist who has served the mental health industry for nearly 4 decades. During that time, he has consulted patients, practitioners, medical facilities, nonprofit organizations, and community groups. While his initial interest in psychiatry was to expand on communication and human connections as primary healing tools, a shift in the medical paradigm in the 80s led to physicians diagnosing patients with biological and chemical imbalances and prescribing medications as a primary way of dealing with life's distress. The medications, which on occasion seemed to briefly quell the stated concerns, appeared to be exasperating, even causing the symptoms they were prescribed to treat. In 2006, Dr. Fred began taking a new approach with his patients, working with a chosen few to assist in reclaiming their lives from the clenched fists of psychiatric diagnosis and medications. Lo and behold, they reliably eventually improved, even to the point of their diagnosis actually disappearing. And Dr. Fred, I want to welcome you to Luminary Leaders Live.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Shelly. It's just wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. And, and I have to say, I saw you live a couple of months ago in a group where you were the speaker. And I'll tell you, that room was captivated. And the conversation was just electric. Everything that came out of what you were sharing was really intriguing to everybody in the room. And I mean, people had questions. It was just a really wonderful conversation. And it went on for some time because there was so much interest. And that's really what you do. So what I would love for you to do, Dr. Fred, even though I read your little bit of your bio, tell us about yourself and what ignites you with the work that you do.
Right. So, I appreciate you referencing the live show that we did there, or the live talk that we did. And in fact, you're right. Everybody was really deeply involved. And the truth is, what I have to say is so universal that I can expect nearly any room that I'm in, when I bring forth the actual truth of what I'm saying, to be equally activated, because what I'm saying isn't very controversial. What I'm saying is that human connection is at the center, the source, the prerequisite for all healing of all conditions, of all types, everywhere. That human connection is what we really need in order to get this healing of our wounds, or of our traumas, of our day-to-day lives that have gone astray, that are, no longer aligned with what's really matters to us.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a little bit how I got here. I arrived on the planet a long time ago, 1958, and I had 2 older brothers that lived with my parents, who were kind of waiting for me to bring joy to what sounded like a pretty chaotic situation. And little Freddie popped out with the new job description of bringing joy and peace and love, and maybe a new level of communication to a family in that level of disarray.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I did pretty well for a couple of years, I think, until probably my brothers got sick of me, but maybe that's a topic for a different day. And, what ended up happening is I really became entirely entranced, entirely entertained, entirely committed to learning how to communicate. I'm not sure I would have used that word as a 4-year-old, but I really saw
Yeah.
that people were talking to each other and getting things done. And I wanted to learn how to do that.
Yeah. So it was intriguing to you.
Well, it's always
Yeah.
been intriguing for sure. Like, how is
Yeah.
it? What are they doing talking to each other? And what is it? Why do they respond when I say things? And what is it that I can say to get the response that I want? So communication was never a short suit for me. In elementary school, I spoke often and loudly. And there's no elementary school teacher who has forgotten having Dr. Fred as one of their students.
Oh,
I
gosh.
really just wanted to speak and learn how to communicate. But,
Yeah.
in school, that wasn't always what was taught to us. We were taught to, sit still and regurgitate that which the teacher said or which the professor said as we grew older. And that was considered education. So we really got more muffled and more stifled and more muted as our education went along. Now, so far, I'm not saying anything controversial at all, Shelley. Everyone who's been in the American educational system has experienced something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as we went on, I expected, okay, maybe in high school, they'll let me finally communicate. And in high school, it actually got a little bit worse. So then I went into college at the University of Michigan, and I was really expecting to learn how to communicate there. But in Ann Arbor, I did learn how to communicate, but not in the school setting, more on the streets. I eventually realized that education wasn't for me, and I dropped out of school. I outright dropped out, and I went to California in order to find out who I was. And I took a Greyhound bus, and I spent a summer in Berkeley, and I really learned a little bit about who I was. But my mom, rightfully told me that you should go get a degree first and then go find out who you are. So I took out the Greyhound again back east all the way to Detroit and then to Ann Arbor again. And there was a new program. It was a new industry growing at that time called computers. And the only computer in Michigan was at the University of Michigan. So I already knew that campus, and I re-enrolled at the University of Michigan and spent I enrolled in the computer science department and just spent my time, like in the computer room, like filling out batch cards and punch cards. And anyways, that didn't work out very well either. I eventually left. Now, this is when my role with the mental health started. While I was about 23 years old, I got a job as a mental health child care worker. My mom got me the application and a state mental facility for, kids between the ages of 14 and 16, 14 and 18.
Yeah.
And it was there that I really started getting paid to communicate and really got to see on the ground how important it was to connect with other people. And I would heal, they would heal, everyone would heal. I had an afternoon shift, so I could take these kids out in the woods and take them out into the, Pontiac Silverdome or Greenfield Village or all the Detroit or, the football games and basketball games. And I had a great time. But the thing I really hated was the way psychiatry wasn't treating these kids right. And psychiatry was medicating these kids. We would call the psychiatrist in the middle of the night. The kid would be up too late or it'd be in a fight. And the psychiatrist would come down and interview the child for a few seconds and interview us for a few seconds and then write an order. And then we had to hold the child down physically while he was screaming, kicking, fighting, spitting, yelling. And we'd have to give him like an adult dose of a antipsychotic, anti-anxiety cocktail. Of an injection in his hip, and it was horrible. And by the way, Shelley, this is actually still going on in all the hospitals around the country.
We've all seen it.
Well, what we don't know is how pervasive it is. It's so pervasive. It's everywhere, and it's a problem for me. So eventually, it was a greater enough incentive. My brother was already a psychiatrist to go back to school. And this time to bring communication and connection to the mental health field using whatever means I could, because I loved helping people with communication.
Yeah.
While I was in school, that thing happened that you talked about, the 80s, and the advent of Prozac. And Prozac really shifted the whole conversation about psychiatry to a biological field, biological psychiatry or chemical imbalances. And by the time I got my residency, I was now earmarked to be a regular psychiatrist. And there I was medicating people. The exact reason I went into the field was to do nothing like medicate people. And there I was being called on to do it. Shelley, I've written over 100,000 medication prescriptions in my life. And I've taken care of, tens of thousands of people, right around 40,000.
My
And
gosh.
this was a time when I was doing something that was flying against who I was. I was not speaking my own true voice, right? What I knew to be true wasn't how I was living my life. And I'm guessing some of our listeners are also living their life misaligned with who they are.
Oh, absolutely they are.
Right? Yeah, we take jobs that are not consistent with our aligned self. Then we have a miserable life, and we can't get successful if we're living a life that's misaligned with who we are.
Yeah.
In 2006 is when this journey took that turn. And that is when I started just taking a handful of people who I thought could do a lot better than they were doing. And they were doing fine.
Without the medication.
Yeah, I took them off their
medication.
Right. And then took them off their diagnosis. And they got reliably better. And I was like, wow, stunning. I started doing this more and more. And, that called that my true voice moment. And that's how the true voice technology initially got its birth many years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
The truth is that people aren't speaking their truth. And if you don't speak your truth, then frankly, no one will ever know you,
That's true.
Right? If you don't speak your truth, you'll never be heard. And I mean, you can be hearded for sure, as we see, but you will not be heard. And, over time, Welcome to Humanity came, and it was a, pretty self-explanatory brand. I designed it in the end of last decade. And it was a place to really get that all the human experiences are exquisite, including the ones that are miserable, including the ones that are undesirable, including the ones that are horrible, including the ones that are unspeakable, like the ones that are even really none of us want. They're exquisite in their own right because they were given to us in this very transient lifetime to experience and understand how it is to experience this level of pain or discomfort. But not only that, the beautiful experiences as well. And I really began, as I now had the credentials to do so, to create a coaching environment, a transformational, restorative coaching environment where I could listen to people and be with them, and in fact, healing
more
would take place.
Yeah, we're present. Exactly. And kind of bringing you back to 2006, obviously you had been practicing for many years and it just felt, it didn't feel good, because you knew that you were doing prescriptions and it was not, not something that you wanted to continue to do. What was the actual shift that took place in that moment that you said, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore. When you took that group of people and you use communication to really get them to, be unmedicated.
Yeah. Well, 2006 was a really a crucible year. I had, some challenges in my marriage at the time. I had challenges with my daughter, who was then 15. And I even had challenges inside of medicine where, it was unclear that I would want to continue to be a doctor at all. And so in order for me to make a decision to return with, all out to be a doctor, the only way I could do that was actually to begin to pursue what I knew was right, which was that sometimes these medications actually perpetuate or simply cause the symptoms they're marketed to treat. Now, I knew this from my experience, and I decided it was my obligation and my responsibility, my accountability to try it out and see because they never teach doctors how to stop medicine. So
just
the idea
prescribe,
was, yeah, exactly. Choose the medicine based on what comes out of the patient's mouth. And this was an idea, a group of people who wanted to come off medicine, and we took them off and they got better. They got way better. And then it started happening I did it to tens of people, then hundreds of people. I had a big practice in Cincinnati, and a lot of people got way better. And boy, after I finally realized that I could actually help people heal, there was no turning back from there, because I don't think the medicine really works.
That's right. Because you think of the side effects that the medication has, and people walking around like zombies, just because they think that they need to be taking this medication. Right. And the true voice, when I think of the correlation from what you did before and what you're doing now, let's talk about how the true voice really kind of excelled with what you're doing and how you're using it to help the masses.
Yeah. So, thank you for asking. And, basically at this point, all that I have left is the understanding that human connection is at the heart of all healing. And if the thing about human connection is if you pretend to be someone that you're not in order to protect the person that you are, that's like a ludicrous, preposterous, absurd way to go through life. It doesn't work.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy. Like you got to remember all of your lies and then pretend to tell people over and over again that's who you really are, even if it's not.
Yeah.
So by helping people really get to their truest voice, what I've learned is that people really love finding out or rediscovering who they've been their whole life anyways. Because in our life, we have, covered ourselves up and decided that we would have to do things that weren't who we really were in order to make money or to make friends or to stay in the right group or those kinds of reasons that we thought were a good idea to chip away at our own personal, genuine reality. What True Voice does is use multiple different disciplines that I've gained over time, including 2 books that I've written. I wrote The Creative 8. The Creative 8 really looks at alternatives to regular psychiatry, art, music, dancing, singing, drama, and the like.
Right. Which we did at the event that you spoke at. Yeah, we used some of those modalities.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful stuff. What the theory there is that so much things that are called mental illness are actually blockages in self-expression. So when we really get that we can be self-expressed for what really matters to us, including if we're upset or afraid or nervous or depressed, that if we can connect with another person when we're feeling that level of pain or misery, oftentimes that's all that's really needed to kickstart us into restarting and resetting our life. So a couple times today, for instance, I've had conversations where all I could do was resonate with a client. And when I did, she, in this particular case, really got a new level of awareness and a new lease on life by having someone finally, that's what therapy is supposed to aim at. But frankly, that's a topic for another day as well. The idea here is that I like to work myself out of a job. I like to give people access to their own truest voice and then utilize it functionally in the world, whether you want to become a podcaster, or maybe you just want to be an effective parent, or maybe you now want to be an effective spouse. Maybe your kids have left home. So I'm looking a little bit at that population these days, 45, 55 years old, with their kids having left. You could look across the kitchen table. There's that person that you married. And you're like, how did we get here?
You don't remember?
Yeah.
It's a whole new level of connection, and the family dynamic has changed.
Right. It has. And really, you're speaking when you say that, the kids as well, the 20-somethings out there are so brilliant. And they're so, they've been around for all the changes these last 20 or 30 years. They got plenty to say. They even got new level solutions to offer. And they have a true voice that's being muted as well.
Yes. And I know that you really specialize working with, adults from 18, I think, to
18 to 25 is what this course was initially aimed at. But, to tell you the truth, we're looking at them and their parents these days, like 2 different groups. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I would think. And let's talk about, first I want to talk about, you are, a fabulous speaker. I saw firsthand, the way that you connect with the audience, the information that you share. You're not like another speaker out there because you have such a unique story. And in the same token, you give advice to people that it's general, but it's also very specific about, ways that people can take immediate action to change. Like when you had us doing those exercises and literally coloring, which, when you think of adults, using colored pencils and paper, we had some really good drawings that came from that. And, the dancing that we did, we just kind of got up and moved around and people were smiling and laughing. And that's the kind of activity that you bring to your speaking. So let's talk about, I know what differentiates you, but what do you feel is the differentiator, from you compared to other speakers? Not to mention that you're a medical doctor and you can get out there and speak in front of different types of, really all types of groups.
Well, that's a good question, and thank you so much for honoring and acknowledging my speaking, the effectiveness of my speaking. So you
Yeah.
speak to one thing, which is the fact that I do have an MD or a doctor. That doesn't necessarily make me any better than anyone else, but it does attract people. People think that because I have an MD and that I've had tens of thousands of patients, and I guess to some degree it's true. I've had experience with all age groups and with all people with all sorts of issues and problems and different different circumstances that they've had to deal with,
Yeah.
and they have come to me to share. That was their purpose in coming to see me, was to share their life. So I've been a
Mm.
recipient of so many people sharing their life with me, whether it be like
Yeah.
whether it be like confessing something, or asking questions, or
And
telling
that's heavy, isn't it? It can be heavy, right?
sometimes
Because some of the stories that you're hearing and listening to, but the great thing is that you have that, and the way that you treat people, I love it because you're
thank
very caring and you're present,
you.
and you hear them and you're listening to their true authentic voice.
Well, that's the thing. I think that if you really want to point to what it is that's effective about me is that I really don't see myself so different than anybody else. I myself lived pretty duplicitously for quite
Mm.
some time as a doctor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just get that we all do. We learn at a very young age. If we scream a little louder, we get a bigger lollipop. And if we blame our younger sister, which I did, for stuff that I did, then
Yeah.
she would get in trouble and I wouldn't. And we kept
Mhm.
those things in our armamentarium. And
Mhm.
the crack in the cement got larger and larger. We never went back to repair it. And then it became part of our personality. So in
Yeah.
fact, we were telling lies to ourselves, and then it just became part of who we are. Like, we're supposed to lie in order to make it through the world. What's so
Mhm.
exciting, and this is what I popped out in 64 years ago to do, is that by just reminding people that I can love you through and through. Maybe Voltaire said it best. I
Mhm.
I may disagree with what you have to say, but I will, fight to the death your right to say it. And I
Mhm.
think that that's the way that we all could go. And you know what, Shelley, if we don't spend some time actually having conversations with each other, all the things that are threatening humanity now, and that everything from the virus to climate change to
Social
sex
media. I
trafficking
mean,
and social
yeah.
media, then if we can't speak our true voice, then it's looking pretty grim and bleak into the future. But if we do speak our true voice, that's when miracles happen. And so I never heard of a more urgent time. And I get to walk out there these days and really bring this level of urgent, genuine authenticity to people, whether it's in the
Yeah.
corporate setting or the community setting and the family setting. There is
Mhm.
nowhere where being authentic is a bad idea. Now,
Exactly. And when I think of, you being a speaker, what is it that you want people to bring away when you present in front of a group? And really, again, you could speak in front of really any type of group,
mhm.
or organization, company, conference. I mean, just, fill in the blank. But what do you really want them to walk away with, Dr. Fred, after
Well,
hearing you?
right. It's a great question. And I think what I want is a new access to a realization that there's freedom right around the corner, and you don't have to go to a mountain or to a cave in Tibet, or you don't have to necessarily take plant medicine, or you don't have to like sit on the therapy for a number of years. You don't have to do all that.
Yeah.
The truth is, you're pretty great as you are, and we don't blame a log for burning in a fire. So what I really want people to do to get is
Mm.
like a renewed willingness to rediscover that which they already are. And
Yeah.
by
I
that,
love that.
open up
I
a
just love that.
new relationship with the people. And look, you don't have to go to the mountaintops and scream out
Find
that you
yourself.
hate your mother-in-law or something. That's not
Yeah.
necessary, but you could incrementally make changes in how you deal with the people in your life that matter to you, the people in your life who care for you. And just that level of resonating harmony will alter your life fundamentally and bring you maybe a new level of feeling alive that you thought was gone. It's
Yeah.
not gone.
And that's pretty profound when you think of it. If you sit in where you're speaking for, let's say, a half hour, 45 minutes, to be able to walk away from a conversation like that, that's changing lives, and I think it ties in really nicely with Welcome to Humanity, because like you were saying earlier, if we don't start speaking our true, authentic voice, I mean, people already are looking down at their phones and you can barely get their attention. People are running into, posts because they're looking at their phone. I mean, metal posts. And it's just interesting to see. I love to sit on a bench and just people watch, just see human behavior, the things that people do. And it's amazing just to think how disconnected people are. And if they would just communicate, if you smile at someone and they smile back, that's such a great feeling, when people genuinely accept your smile.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah.
Yes, I fully agree. And what's really great, Shelley, is that each and every one of us, there's 7.8 billion or so people on the planet.
Oh gosh.
And I think it's pretty close to pretty close to all of them who would say that all they really want in life is to be heard and appreciated for who they are.
Yes, exactly. I had a conversation with someone yesterday that said that they wanted to be heard and be appreciated for what they're doing.
Exactly.
And that's, I mean, ditto. That's exactly.
So we go right to the heart of the matter. You do not need an antidepressant to get that done. You do not need a psychiatric diagnosis to give you a reason to continue being the jerk you've been.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay, you're a jerk. You want to know why you're a jerk? Because we're all jerks at some level. It's tough to be a human. And in this world, with all the twisting, turning, misconceptions and deceptions and corruption and all the things that are going on, it's impossible to not be a little overwhelmed at times, or a little afraid at times, maybe a lot, a little depressed at times, maybe a lot, a little anxious at times, maybe a lot. It's okay to recognize that in yourself, have acceptance, forgiveness, compassion, and then recognize it in other people, and then step forward. You know what the key ingredient of true voice is, Shelley?
What's that?
It's listening. It's listening.
Yeah. Listening.
Listening is the key ingredient to self-expression.
I think it is, and that's where a lot of people, because they have so much on their mind and they're not fully present when they're like, right now we're having this conversation, and it's a great conversation because you're giving so much greatness for people to really step into just something that they would absolutely benefit from,
sure.
By just listening and letting go of so many things that hold them back.
That's true.
And I think that, what you've shared today, I know you have a course and it kind of ties in with what we talked about. Can you talk a little bit about the course? Because I know we have a minute or two left. Sure. I'd love for you to talk about the course.
So the course is beautiful. It's a labor of love. It took about a year to complete. It's actually completing officially in the next 48 hours.
Oh,
and it's already, there are a number of people already taking it. The course is called the True Voice Course. And it's you can find it at truevoicepodcasting.com. It's possible that will be changed, but it was initially designed for people who want to learn how to be heartfelt podcasting guests or hosts. Like inside of this world right here is a great place to practice being your truest self. And I used podcasting as a template. And then I utilized both my books. My other book, which I can even give away for free to your listeners, can be found at findyourtruevoicebook.com. That's findyourtruevoicebook.com. And you pay shipping, and I'll send you a copy of my book. And I'd love to talk to you about how that goes.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes too.
Yes, that would be fabulous. Yeah. And look, we take 12 weeks and we get people from zero to podcaster, or at least zero to fully self-expressed. And to me, there's nothing more rewarding than getting someone aligned with who they really are. Because after all, if you're not going to be who you really are, then what value did this life? If you're going to die without anyone know you, again, the mass of men live lives of quiet desperation and go to their graves with their songs still in them. That is Henry David Thoreau. And that's something that we can combat by actually getting in touch with our true voice and becoming that person.
Wow. That's pretty heavy. I mean, it's amazing. And I want to remind our audience, we are here with Dr. Fred Moss, and we have all of his information scrolling on the bottom of the screen. So please do a screenshot. He shared so much great information, and I invite you to go back to the beginning and listen. It was just powerful. And Dr. Fred, thank you so much. And I want to ask you one last question before we end the broadcast. What is something that you'd like to leave with the audience that we already haven't talked about that really is profound?
Yeah. I think the best thing I have to say is there might be nothing wrong with you. Even if everyone thinks there is, even if you think there is, even if doctors have told you that there is, there might be nothing wrong with you. You might be exactly as you are because that's who you are. And if we can start from there, that there might be nothing wrong with you and that you really just want to be loved and want to be heard, and step into that, like really get that you weren't born defective from a psychological standpoint. And you're not defective now. It's a confusing world, and being uncomfortable in a confusing world, well, that's called normal. And since each of us really thinks that there's something wrong with us, thinking there's something wrong with you is also called normal. So there might be nothing wrong with you. I think that's the thing I really want to tell our audience.
Yeah. And people that are watching, we want them to know that they can reach out to you. We have your email address, and also, you can connect with me if you'd like to have Dr. Fred speak at your event. We do represent Dr. Fred, so we're excited to have you on our roster and in our community with Luminary Leaders. And Dr. Fred, thank you so much for this interview. And we also want to thank our audience for being here. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are streaming on 8 different platforms today. So, you can catch us on many different platforms. This interview will also be on all the podcast apps. So we'll be on iHeart, we'll be, all of them. So just check. And if you want to listen, while you're exercising or while you're dancing or, coloring, whatever you happen to be doing, you can listen to this podcast or show with Dr. Fred. And we want to also thank our sponsor, who is Dan Leonard with Endeavor Mortgage. He's located out of Seal Beach. And thank you for your sponsorship, Dan. We appreciate that. And we would love to have you come back and join us again for another episode. And Dr. Fred, we're going to have to do another interview in a few months just to kind of touch base and see how things are going and any new developments, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Super cool. Yeah, I really love that. I love, there's my life is so great, and it's not because the world around me is great, because the world around me is not always so great. Yeah. But one of the things that I really want to pass on is that being aligned, getting closer and closer to being aligned with myself has been the gift, the gift. Yeah. And I really get to see where my own flaws and deficiencies are, and then maybe address them a little better than I did yesterday. And all of a sudden, life is worthwhile. My life with my wife Alexandra and my three little cats, Desposito, Winston, and Valentino.
How cute!
It's just they run our life. So it's really
pets are great.
Yeah, they really are.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I'm sorry we didn't get to see any of your cats, but that to be continued for the next episode.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
All right, Dr. Fred. And then to our audience, thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.